Hi, this is Linda Moulton Howe. I'm so happy to have people coming to my Earthfiles YouTube channel. And some of you may have heard me talk on Coast to Coast and Phenomena Radio in the past month or so that I'm trying to work on an autobiography of my complex life. And in doing so, I have found myself going into old cabinets and boxes in my garage where I have still some of the original files from all of my animal mutilation work in 1979 to 80 and beyond. And what I have been finding as a benefit for this search in my own history have been finding files that I haven't seen. In the case of what I'm going to talk with you about tonight, I have not seen since 1988. And that is the year that I got the two files that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And they're in a category of what I call High Strangeness Anonymous. In fact, that was the title that I put on the folder back in 1988. And I would like to start sort of a new process, if we could, where every once in a while, maybe every other YouTube, that I'll tie what I'm going to be reporting to you about to a brand new Earthfiles report that you can go to so that you can see right now as I am talking the documents that I'm referring to that I have found from 1989. It is a brand new Earthfiles called Notes about MJ12 Project Sigma and LANL, which is Los Alamos National Laboratory, the WX division. That's the title. It's now at the top of my Earthfiles website, and if you click on the link, it goes directly to the report because I categorize this under science, so it would be accessible to everyone. And we are talking about the science of high strangeness. Now, what I'd like to do is to share some of these documents and some of my insights from 2017, looking back at this content that goes back. And then, hopefully, there will be some of you that are coming to the Earthfiles YouTube channel who might have firsthand professional information about some of this. And as I wrote in my Earthfiles report, when I started reading these, I realized that they were more mysterious to me in some ways in 1988 than they are today in 2017. That we have all evolved, who have been trying to understand what is this alien presence that apparently was the reason why John F. Kennedy was assassinated. The alien presence is apparently the reason for the secret space program. The alien presence is apparently the reason for all of the huge amounts of trillions of dollars missing from the Department of Defense. So, trying to understand the evolution of our government's own comments in its dance with trying to deal with an alien presence is what these documents are about, and that I hope I can do this now more frequently, since I am burrowing into all of these old histories and finding some astonishing insights and documents. Now, hopefully a lot of you are now looking at Earthfiles, and I have in my hand the original from my folder. It's stamped confidential, notes on Project Sigma, type operation in Australia. Facility location known, confidential. Very sensitive location, normally with AUSTEO, AUSTEO, an acronym which means Australian eyes only, like UK eyes only. A classification. Now, today in 2017, there is no question that they are talking about Pine Gap at the center of the Australian continent, which we, the United States of America, we did a treaty with Australia decades ago so that the United States owns, operates, and manages that Pine Gap facility right at the center of Australia. And I have been told long ago by some people who worked in a military capacity that the reason the United States wanted to do a treaty with Australia and get Pine Gap under our management is that we wanted a facility where we could literally clean the landscape and all the surrounding area of any electrical wires, anything running electricity, in order to have a very clean electromagnetic area because of all the sensitive signals that they have been using at Pine Gap in order to communicate through Project Sigma, which is what these notes are about. And Project Sigma was identified for me back in April 9th, 1983, when I was at Kirtland Air Force Base working on that home box office project. And the AFOSI agent, Richard Doty, handed me several papers saying that his superiors had asked him to show them to me, that I could read them. I could not take notes. I could ask him questions, but he directed me to sit in a chair in the middle of this big office at Kirtland, which later on I understood because I was told directly that that chair was designed specifically to be in that room so that the person in that chair would be videotaped, video and audio. And that Project Sigma was in the briefing paper for the President of the United States that Doty showed me on April 9th, 1983. These are notes that come from 1988. And so we are going forward from 83 to 88, 5 years into the future when we pick up on these notes. And in my Earthfiles.com, I lay out what I received after that meeting at Kirtland as the definition of the Project Sigma that was in the paper that he showed me, but not in this detail. Top secret Orcon, Project Sigma, pro-word Aquarius. Originally established as part of Project Sign in 1954, became a separate project in 1976. Its mission was to establish communication with aliens. This project met with positive success when in 1959 the United States established primitive communications with the aliens. It's my understanding that the first that they did get any communication with were what they called the extraterrestrial biological entities, the Ebens. The prime intelligence of the Ebens stands about 5 foot, 5'2", and does not necessarily have the big black lenses on. And all of the 3 to 4 foot are androids or hybrids that they have made to be workers on this planet, and they almost always have the big black lens eyes. On April 25th, 1964, a U.S. Air Force intelligence officer met with aliens at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. The contact lasted for approximately 3 hours. After several attempted methods of communicating, the intelligence officer managed to exchange basic information with the aliens. This project is continuing at a site in New Mexico. It is my understanding that in the documentary from the early 1970s called Ufos, Past, Present, and Future, you should be able to find that in YouTube, by Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler. They were doing this project with the Department of Defense. And they had been promised the same kind of film that I was promised in my home box office production effort, that there had been 4 or 5 cameras, some in the air in helicopters, some on the ground, as 3 egg-shaped Eben craft came down in what's called an offensive-defensive position. The landing craft is protected by the 2 craft above. They came down in a triangular pattern that the side of this white egg, the Eben's craft are supposed to look like more like eggs than the silver discs, and that the side just suddenly opened and some kind of a ramp came down. 2 Eben came down, met our group of science and military, and behind the 2 Ebens was what is called an archeloid. In the Ronald Reagan briefing on various alien types, the archeloid has a very huge beaked nose, vertical pupilled reptilian eyes, a head that has a peak and was covered by a ropey headdress like the Sumerian or Anunnaki, and was carrying a rod that had a spiral going around it, and that rod was extended outward, and that the humans there understood that this was a communication rod, and that somehow the telepathic communication from these beings could be put into English, and it would be the English in each brain, because the interaction is with the language center, so that if you were from Alabama, the thought words might sound like Southern accent. If you were from Norway or wherever you're from, allegedly, the language center is being directly accessed by this technology, so that there can be telepathic communication from the beings to the human minds. And that all of this that I've just described, and a lot more having to do with an exchange of technology, occurred April 25th, 1964. Now, there are two stories about whether it took place at Holloman Air Force Base. That may have been a ruse. The actual meeting, I've been told, was at the Trinity site, where we had the first atomic bomb test in 1945, that this meeting in April 25th, 64 was actually there at the Trinity site. Whether that's true and Holloman was the ruse, or Trinity was the ruse and Holloman was the actual landing, we'll have to wait for more clarification someday, hopefully, from a more honest government. Now, coming back to the Australia Project Sigma, these are notes that we do not have all the context. It is as if somebody just provided some notes from some kind of a briefing. And they are talking about, the second paragraph appears to be a Royal Australian Air Force Defence Science and Technology Organization, and they're referring to the Australian Eyes Only work. And then the third is a very interesting paragraph. Between 12 to 14 craft are held at a secure hangar-style facility. Most are very unusual in appearance, like Star Wars type craft. Think of George Lucas. Think of those kinds of craft that he used, with strange projections underneath. Only one was round in appearance, being approximately 12 feet in diameter. And I think that suggests what a lot of people in the abduction syndrome have said. We hear all about discs, and we hear all about flying saucers from the 1947 June Kenneth Arnold. But so many abductees say, but what I saw out a window, what I saw in the air was more triangular shaped. So again, it's the question of who is in which shape and type with which agenda. Paragraph 4, only some of the objects have been opened. And what that means to me, from very many pieces that I have been exposed to by whistleblowers having to do with the back engineering of extraterrestrial technology, the objects are some extraterrestrial technology that have been retrieved. Objects have been opened. Some seem very complex. Others are very simple looking, like hydraulics, virtually totally inconsistent with space travel. Another one of those paradoxes. What are we dealing with? Why is it that some of the back engineering is clearly dealing with technology so advanced that we still haven't been able to deal with it? And yet there have been descriptions that I've heard before of things seemingly so simple that it was not understood what the test was to the human. Paragraph 5. Various personnel were seconded to work on these craft, including top RAAF mechanics. They were reportedly very frightened of this work. They did not know what they might encounter. So these would be aerospace tech and engineers who obviously had information and had scuttlebutt rumors from others who had been working on back engineering projects. And it's puzzling, and it would be very interesting to know what is behind that sentence, that they were reportedly very frightened of this work. 6, paragraph 6. Occupants had been recovered from some of these craft. There were reportedly numerous types, but the source was best informed on 2 males that were identical to humans externally, but internal organs were completely different except for smaller lungs. These occupants were deceased. That fits into something that I have heard about since the early 80s, that one of our government's greatest concerns is who walks on this earth, looks human, but is not. So here we have a description from 1988 in these notes on Project Sigma, that 2 male bodies, identical to humans externally on the outside, but internal organs completely different, except for lung tissue and lungs that are smaller. Paragraph 7. This account might fit in with the unconfirmed claims of an Australian operation or project called Project Apotheosis. A cover page and one introductory page has allegedly been cited by a source. It refers to modules and aliens being ready for transfer from an Australian facility. But to where? What does this mean? Now, it's interesting that over the decades, I have occasionally had brief discussions with people about this Project Apotheosis, and there have been different interpretations. This one is talking about a transfer of alien extraterrestrial beings that they have in Project Sigma in Australia, probably at Pine Gap they're being kept, to someplace. But I've also heard, and I find this really intriguing, that there was an effort to take Albert Einstein's energy equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, or as David Bohm, the brilliant physicist who wrote the famous book about wholeness and the implicate order being the construction rules of this universe. And in that brilliant book, David Bohm says, matter, mass, all mass is frozen light. And what's another term for frozen light in many ways would be photons, that at the root of everything would be photons. But a Project Apotheosis, in discussions I've had, went further to the context that looking at Bohm's work and whatever the aliens were communicating, that this concept, that I guess you would say, the underpinnings of all of the fabric of this universe came to the photons, to the light. And why they would have been trying to get a reality check on that Einstein equation, and could the fabric of the universe be all light, it's very interesting, because what does that mean that Project Sigma types were exposed to that made them want to investigate that? Now, the next old page that I found in that same file, High Strangeness Anonymous, it says notes from WX Division, September 9th, 1988. The other, I believe, came to me in May, so these are within months of each other. And reference LANL, which is Los Alamos National Lab. Now, before I go into the content in that documentary, I would like to just give some brief comments that I was surprised, because WX, which is the LNL, it is their weapons testing. It's called the Weapons Experiments Division at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is about 35 miles northwest of Santa Fe, which most people know Santa Fe, and I put a map in this report. And when you start doing research, I remember when I was putting together an Alien Harvest and my 2-volume book, Glimpses of Other Realities, that when you would try to do historic searches on names, on Project Y, Z, X, WX, that you couldn't find anything substantive. Well, now, whether it's substantive or not, there is at least, you can go to, and I put the URL for this website in this report, WX's core ideology. So, and this is at a Los Alamos National Laboratory site today. WX supports national security through use of our national security energetics, NSE, capability for the invention and application of energetic materials, and that would be radioactivity, and our dynamic compression science, capability for understanding dynamic material response to address conventional nuclear and homeland defense needs, and that they are working from bench top to large-scale open-air experimentation. We employ a broad suite of diagnostic, modeling, and simulation capabilities to evaluate nuclear weapon response and performance. And it goes on, but basically the WX division at Los Alamos since World War II and the development of the atomic bomb has been to do with all things of a nuclear weapons category. So with that as background, here is this second old document that I found in an old cabinet that had come to me in 1988. So this is from the WX division at Los Alamos, and with a date, September 9th, 1988. 1. There is an unprecedented push to develop a missile that is capable of penetrating 1,000 meters of Earth prior to detonating. That means something that you could drop with a nuclear warhead. It would go down 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters, I believe, is like 30, I know I have this here. It goes down 3,280 feet, 1,000 meters. So it would go down, 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 almost 2/3 of a mile, and then it would be a nuclear explosion. And so why would they be writing about doing something like this? 2, the device under development carries a 1 megaton warhead. 3, some requirements and comments given to the WX division were as follows. And what this seems to me to indicate, it's who's contracted or who is ordering the creation of a nuclear weapon that could penetrate down over a half-mile down and then explode. And so they're saying, here are some of the requirements. 1, or A, the device must be capable of penetrating 1,000 meters of tough, hard, packed soil and sustain no operational damage. It's hard to conceive, but that was what they wanted. This type of soil is commonly found in New Mexico, where we will be conducting the penetration tests. And the way I read that is where they want to drop this and use this weapon would have soil like New Mexico. B, the missile apogee must not exceed 30,000 feet. The highest it would go and then drop down would be 30,000 feet. C, the impact deviation will not exceed 50 meters. It has to be so accurate that it could go up 30,000 feet and come down to a target no further, could not be outside of that target more than 50 meters. D, this is peculiar. This is almost like a political thrust here. We believe the Russians have constructed underground bases in the Soviet Union 500 to 1,000 meters deep. Since their soil is the same as that found in New Mexico, accurate tests can be performed here in New Mexico. Fallout shelters that deep are far too expensive for the United States to construct. Close quote. Well, in my Earthfiles report tonight, my comment about this is that if they're talking about that the Russians, the Soviet Union, would have underground bases at 500 to 1,000 meters deep, 3,280 feet, with soil like New Mexico, the implication is that they are referring to making this nuclear weapon to attack it someplace in the Soviet Union. But I talked about all of this with John Lear, pilot, UFO researcher, well-known person, and he said that he would interpret this, that the Soviet Union references were counterintelligence misinformation in order to cover up a secret war that is going on between humans and an alien presence that is, some of it is considered a threat to surface life, and that whatever this is being constructed for, John insisted that he had other sources who said it's because they want to go down and blow up bases that are part of the alien presence in places on this planet. Now, in the paragraph 4 now, in this LANL WX memo, it says, the YY Roman numeral 2 facility is located in Los Alamos at the rear of the ice cave. The ice cave, or ice as it is sometimes called, is a high security installation cut into the side of the mesa Los Alamos sits on. The entrance is via the road under the Diamond Street Bridge. McDonald's restaurant is directly over the facility. Entrance into the cave can be seen by leaning over the cliff behind McDonald's. YY Roman numeral 2 is double Faraday shielded. The reason given was to attenuate computer emissions. It would seem strange to do this, however, since the cave is surrounded by a 200-foot thick wall of rock. Now, I still remember talking about this with John Lear and others that year of 1988, that the mention of behind McDonald's and all of that is like, oh, well, then this is just somebody's funny memo that they're putting out, and then this is all a hoax. But in the discussion, when it talks about the reference to the capital YY hyphen Roman numeral 2 as a double Faraday shielded space, it's very important to realize that there have been many, many people who have talked about having to have meetings inside of rooms that were Faraday cages. And I go into, in this Earthfiles report, the Faraday cages are made usually of some kind of mesh material that will counter if somebody is trying to eavesdrop, and it will also it will protect if you have sensitive electronic equipment in a very, very highly classified meeting with scientists and engineers, and you have to discuss equipment or you have equipment. You don't want interference. So the Faraday cage helps cut out any possible interference and can also counter listening devices. How much of Earth's underground is occupied by one or more alien presences? That's a question that I haven't had anybody successfully answer. The remote viewers say that they have always seen that there are at least 5 or 6 main places on this Earth underground that have had an alien or alien presences for thousands, millions of years. Are they friendly or unfriendly? Lynn Buchanan and remote viewers have said some are friendly and some are unfriendly. The fact that we would be wanting to try, if this was a serious notes about something that was leaked, and we were trying to build some sort of a nuclear weapon that could penetrate down more than half a mile in certain kind of soil and then blow up a 1 megaton bomb to destroy whatever was there, that would indicate that we were perceiving whatever we were doing down there was against something we considered to be an enemy, I'm assuming. So hostility in some of the alien presence, allyship in other alien presence seems to be a constant theme right from the beginning of all my work back starting in '79 in animal mutilations. And could there be a secret war ongoing since 2011 and for reasons unknown? And I pick out that year because that is when I began getting all kinds of the first boom, metallic scraping, the strange airy wind with brass trumpets, people called it. Those three sounds began being reported from people in both hemispheres from 2011 on to this day. Is it possible that the source of all of these still unexplained bizarre sounds, booms and the metallic sounds, are associated with strong compression waves from above and ground shaking, cement cracking explosions from below, because they are related to what people have told me going all the way back to the middle of the 1980s, that there is a secret war, and that the surface life of humanity has deliberately been kept dumb and blind because they didn't want people to panic. But I would say to you who are in this collaboration and sharing with me, I would love to know what each one of you think about that question. Should humans continue to be denied the truth about any kind of an Earth secret war and allies versus enemies? Or should we be told the whole truth and nothing but the truth and let the chips fall where they may? So, thank you, and I'd like to take a few questions.
Great, Linda. Stephen, Anita Smith, CC Jarvis, and Vicky, thank you so much for your super chats. We appreciate you.
Yes.
And your first question tonight is in relation to an interview you did recently with Mr. Doty.
Yes.
The question is, Linda, why would you still trust Doty?
Well, our phenomenon radio wasn't in the context of are we trusting or non-trusting. Let me give you a little background. John Burroughs, who has been haunted by what happened to him in December 1980 in Rendlesham Forest, does a lot of web searches on anybody who's doing investigations or researches or writing or going to the National Archives now that they have released some of those 18 withheld documents. They still haven't released 3 that are probably the most important policy files on extraterrestrials and back engineering technology. We still don't have those. But what they did in June of 2016 is that they, the National Archive from the MOD, released to the National Archive, the physical building, some of those withheld policy files, with the condition that they were not going to put anything on the web. They were not going to be answering any FOIA. If you, a citizen anywhere in the world, wanted to see what they released at the National Archive in June, you have to go to London. You have to go to the National Archive. You have to stand in line. You have to get a pass to go to a desk, and you can only hand write what you find, or apparently they allowed some scanning because there's a man named Isaac Coy. He is a gentleman in London, who has been sort of in the background of various UFO research projects, and Rendlesham. And John Burroughs had gone to Isaac Coy's website and to his Facebook page, having to do with a question that John is still trying to pursue. Why have they redacted, that means blacked out or whited out, so many of even the documents that they did release? Very little really is public. Isaac Coy was able to get a screenshot on a computer of a page that he sent to John and me back in the summer. And Coy said that he would continue to go to the National Archive periodically to sit and write down and make these screenshots and so forth. And that's why John periodically has gone to Isaac Coy's Facebook. And while John was reading something on Isaac Coy's Facebook about a month and a week ago now, up pops a message in the Facebook from Richard Doty, a retired special agent, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, saying he had read with his own eyes in 1984 a 150-page document on what happened in Rendlesham Forest at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. And John was so astonished, he immediately forwarded me this Doty Isaac Coy, these two pieces of information. And he said, look at this. And did you know that there's any AFOSI 150-page report on Rendlesham? No. And we asked several other people. No. Nobody knew. And so John said, why don't we ask him to come on and tell us in his own words what it is that he says that he saw. And that is the 2-hour Phenomena Radio we did. It was fascinating. There was not an issue of trust, because this was an exploration of what is behind his Facebook and what would he say. And we were both smiling at the end when John said, and what, finally, Rick, what do you think happened in Rendlesham Forest? And he laughed and said, well, extraterrestrials, of course. So whatever the whole big, every detail truth is, none of us have it. Counterintelligence has been working overtime since December of 1980 on everything that was happening there as well as other places. But things are shifting. It is, this is a time where I have more substantive whistleblowers than I've ever had before. Getting them on the record is the challenge, but I'm learning a lot of information. So in the context of these revolutionary times, when people seem to be coming with all kinds of more information, and Tom DeLonge has his military that they say they're going to open up We're Not Alone in the Universe. Grant Cameron talks about the Ron Pandolfi, who once upon a time was director of science and technology for the CIA, is talking as if we're going to get that big headline soon. So in that context, the fact that Doty, from all the way back from me, 1983, 2017, there's nothing about what I was working on in 1983 that had anything to do with our pursuit for what is behind these 18 withheld documents from Rendlesham. It's completely different oranges and apples. So these 2 hours were John's and my deep interest to see how would Doty describe the 150 pages. He had a few very interesting insights, but in terms of carrying forward what John is so much would like to know, what exactly happened to John Burroughs in Rendlesham Forest on December 26, 1980, somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, when he and Jim Penniston had been falling down, trying to run fast on that berm, the forest floor. I ran with them when we went over to do Ancient Aliens, and let me tell you, it goes like this. It's like a washboard. The entire forest is on a washboard. That's what the English call berms. You try to run it, you're going to fall down. And that's what these guys were doing. And they were falling down, and they were excited, and they were trying to find those lights. And then this big blast of white light. John remembered the white light. Penniston remembers the white light. John can't remember anything after. Penniston says that out of the white light came the black glassy triangle with the raised symbols that when his fingers touched them, he got zeros and ones, and a download in his mind. And today, we're all struggling to understand what the truth is and what is the reason for that binary code download. And then John has the third night, December 28th, walking beside Adrian Bustinza, who was right there with John. And here are all the lights. And the Colonel Halt has told them that they can go toward the lights. And maybe John, he says, maybe John, maybe you can bring them in. And as they're walking toward the lights, Adrian Bustinza said to us, I saw the light start to engulf John, and the lights pushed me to the ground. As if they were a life form, or they had pressure, or they had some sort of software that turned them into some kind of technology. Bustinza goes to the ground, he's looking up, sees John engulfed in light. That would be the second time, the only person at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge who was completely engulfed in light by outside witnesses, the 26th and the 28th of December 1980. And he still doesn't know why or exactly what happened. So John wanted to know if there would be any insights about that from Richard Doty. And there weren't specific details on that, but it was very interesting to even learn that AFOSI was investigating, apparently right from the beginning, along with the National Security Agency, and probably the CIA was there, and MI6, and it was just a huge menagerie, because there were tactical nuclear weapons in the weapons storage area on both the Woodbridge and the Bentwater side at that UK base at that time in 1980, when RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge was NATO's single largest and most important air base. So all levels of intel, counter-intel, and AFOSI were involved. But this was the first time in this 2-hour Phenomena Radio that John and I had any knowledge that AFOSI had done a 150-page report. Would love to see that report. Anybody out there who's got one, send it to me. What about, are we up for time, or should I take one more question?
That's up to you, Linda.
I know we're getting past, and I guess what I'm going to say is, because some of you might have other things to do, that I would very much like your feedback on these two older documents, and your own feeling about some of these questions having to do with the nature of an alien presence, if it were all opened up with the truth and let the chips fall where they may, or continue the policies of lies and denials. Which do you think is better? And I'm not asking that weighted. There's lots of arguments on both sides, and I would love to know what all of you think. I thank you for being here tonight.